Okay, so if you will turn to Exodus chapter 1. If you're not already there, Exodus chapter 1. I love expository teaching, so we are going to go through all of these verses. I'm just going to read them and we're going to explain them and talk about them just as we did in previous studies. And so that's how we're going to start these first two chapters. So Exodus chapter 1, it begins with the death of Joseph. So recap, at the end of Genesis, Joseph dies. Jacob had 12 sons. Joseph was one of them. His sons, they were jealous of him and envious of him, and they cast him out, put him in a pit. Then he was sold to Potiphar's family. Then Potiphar's wife said that he had done dirty things to her, which wasn't true. He was put in jail. After jail, he was released, and he became second in command over Egypt. Redemption happened for this family, and it's just a beautiful story. If you've not read it or you haven't read it in a long time and you just need to review that, it's a beautiful story at the end of Genesis. But at this time where we pick up, Joseph has died. Okay, he was second in command, so he was a big deal, but he is now dead. Okay, so let's start in verse 1. Now, these are the names of the children of Israel, which came into Egypt. Every man and his household came with Jacob. So these are Jacob's 11 sons they're going to name right here. And then it names Joseph. So that's where we are. If you're not familiar with these scriptures or these families, this is what's happening. These names: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, and all the souls that came out of the loins of Jacob were 70 souls, for Joseph was in Egypt already. And Joseph died, and all his brethren, and all of this generation. So all those names and their wives and their children, they're all dead. That's what it's trying to explain to us. Everybody's gone that was known during that time. And the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. So lots of children of Israel are coming into play, but not from Jacob's direct line. Verse 8. Now there arose a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass, that when there falleth out any war, they join also into our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. Therefore they did set over the taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithmoth and Ramses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew, and they were grieved because of the children of Israel. So what he's saying is, like, the children of Israel were growing more than the Egyptians were growing. They were multiplying. They were having babies. They were growing up, having more babies. They were growing up, more babies. And there were more Israelites than there were Egyptians. And that scared Pharaoh, because he's like, if we have a war, these Israelites could join one of our adversaries and they would overtake us. So he's like, we've got to do something about it. Now, about 400 years, roughly, I looked up multiple commentaries. Some said 360, some said 420. Roughly around 400 years passed between Joseph and this Pharaoh. 400 years. That's quite a bit of time. So this Pharaoh had no idea about God's provisions and what he did during that time of Joseph. So he's just starting fresh here with these people, and he's seeing that they're multiplied, and he's like, no, we can't have this. So what it says is that he puts them in bondage, and he is afflicting them. He's making them work, building towers, building buildings and pyramids and different things. He's making them build cities and working really hard to afflict them so they stop multiplying. And y'all, this is so funny to me. Verse 12, it says, the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew. I mean, they weren't coming home and saying, babe, I'm too tired tonight. You know, like, they weren't saying that, because they were multiplying left and right. They weren't having headaches and stuff. Isn't that humorous? I mean, that is just wild to me. Because, I mean, it says they are afflicted. The women and the men, they were exhausted from working, and they continue to have these babies. They were finding time for good marriages. So I'm all for a strong marriage, but my goodness, that's something. We have no excuse. So I think verse 12 is just funny. I think the Lord is just humorous in that, how he gives us those scriptures. So verse 13. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor. I looked up rigor. I'm using King James, by the way, if my translation's different than yours. I looked up the word rigor there. Rigor means exhaustive and strictness. Exhaustive. I mean, you know, exhaustion. Everybody in here knows what exhaustion feels like. And strictness. That's what rigor means. The Egyptians made the children of Israel serve with exhaustion and strictness. And they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and in brick, and the manner of service in the field. All their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor. So that word is used twice here. They were served with exhaustive and strictness. And the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew midwives. We're down to verse 15 now. So 2 Hebrew midwives here, of which the name of one was Shiphrah and the other was Puah. Okay, so if we're looking for baby girl names, we got Shiphrah and Puah. Add that to your list. And he said, when ye do the office of the midwives to the Hebrew women, and see them upon their stools, if it be a son, they shall kill him. But if it be a daughter, she shall live. So what are we talking about with stools? They would sit on these stools to give birth. And the Hebrew midwives were told, if you see that these Israelite women are giving birth to a son, I want you to kill him right then and there. That's first abortion, right? That's early abortion, where we're hearing that right here. He says, if it's a male, I want you to kill him. If it's a female, you can let her live. That's what these midwives were told to do by Pharaoh. Okay, let that sink in there, because we're going to jump into this story. We're going to be a part of this story. Verse 17, but the midwives feared God. Oh, praise God. The midwives feared God and did not as the king of Egypt commanded them, but he saved the men children alive. And the king of Egypt called for the midwives and said unto them, why have you done this thing and have saved these men children alive? And the midwives said unto Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not the Egyptian women. There's a little jab there. For they are lively and are delivered ere and the midwives come in unto them. Therefore God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and waxed very greatly. And it came to pass, because of the midwives feared God, that he made them houses. I don't exactly know what made them houses means, but it's a good thing. These women feared God, and their names are mentioned in the Bible. How many women were godly women and their names are never mentioned in the Bible? But Shiphrah and Puah, their names are in the Bible. They were God-fearing women, and they feared God on their work site. Even if that meant that they would go to Pharaoh and he would kill them, they still served God. He could have easily cut their throats. He could have easily killed them right then because they disobeyed him. He's Pharaoh. I mean, he's a wicked man here. You can see, he is making these people work, breaking their backs. And these 2 women, they disobeyed because they feared God. I had written there in your notes at the very bottom, Proverbs 9, verse 10, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Not all fear is bad. I know we hear fear is written in the Bible 365 times, and you're not to fear, you're not to fear. Right, you're not to fear your hair turning gray, but you are to fear going to hell. There's a reverent fear, and there's a kind of a silly human fear, of just trusting God. And so not all fear is bad fear. They feared God. Do you fear God? That's a hard question. Do you fear God? When we're out gossiping and we're out talking about somebody, or we're directly doing something, watching something, listening to something, doing something that we know God has told us not to do we fear our consequences from God? Do we fear those consequences, ladies? Because I know sometimes I don't. So, he'll forgive you. He'll forgive you. He'll forgive you. And he will. He's a loving God. But when he says, don't, you don't. In Psalms, it says that the boundary lines have fallen into me in good places. He's given us all good boundaries. When we overstep those boundaries, there's consequences to pay. And so I want you to be mindful of that. These women chose to serve God. How are you serving God on your work site or your school site or wherever you are throughout the day? How are you serving God? Are you fearing God and the consequences, good or bad, that's to come from that? These women, they allowed the male children to live, and they did not kill them like they had been told to do. I love this story. I love these women. I wish I could just sit and talk to them. What was their hearts like? I mean, we read this as a story and we're kind of distant from it, but y'all, what if you were the two women that were told, kill the boys, and you're like, I'm not killing the boys, and then you're summoned to the court, you're summoned to Pharaoh's house, and he's like, why didn't you obey me? I mean, knowing that you could be killed right then. Think about that. I mean, it's just wild. All right, let's go to verse 22. And Pharaoh charged all of his people, saying, every son, because obviously the midwives weren't doing it, so now he's charging the mothers themselves and the fathers themselves. And Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, every son that is born ye shall cast into the river, and every daughter shall live. Okay, so he commanded all the people because he wasn't getting anywhere with Shiphrah and Puah. All right, now we start chapter 2. Chapter 2, verse 1. And there went a man of the house of Levi, and took to wife a daughter of Levi. And the woman conceived, and she bare a son. And when she saw him, that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. Now, why do you think 3 months exactly? Why do we think 3 months? The first 3 months, what are the babies typically doing? Eating and sleeping. So after 3 months, they kind of get awake more, and they kind of are coming in and getting little personalities, and they're crying more and talking more and things. So the first 3 months, she was able to hide him. Now, picture this. This isn't just like hiding, well, I could put him in the closet, nobody would ever know, and I could get him, I could keep him till 9 months or 12. No, this is probably soldiers coming in and out of their homes looking for children. I mean, this is probably a really scary ordeal. This is not just like mine and your houses where we could hide them and put them in the barn or something, and it's not like that. This was probably soldiers coming in and out because they were told to kill all of the babies. So people are looking, okay, they lied or they're hiding it. I mean, these are death sentences to the parents and to these children. She hid him 3 months. Verse 3, and when she could not longer hide him, she took him an ark, bulrushes, and dabbed it with slime and with pitch, and put the child therein, and she laid it in the flags of the river bank. And his sister stood afar off and wept what would be done to him. Can you imagine, have y'all ever done like a puzzle or a project like on your kitchen counter? Can you imagine her getting all these bulrushes and this pitch and on her kitchen counter, trying to make this basket for her baby and just crying and weeping over this and God, I don't want to give him up, and God, don't take my baby, And can you imagine what Jochebed went through, y'all? I know this is a story that we just read through and we dismiss it. This is a real woman who had to sacrifice her child. As a woman who has buried a child, I cannot imagine what she was going through. Can y'all just sit with her right now in her kitchen? Her bread is baking in the stove. She's got a 3-year-old that was running around, Aaron that was running around, and she had Miriam running around who was just a couple years older than that, and then she has a 3-month baby, and she's having to make this basket of pitch, and she's just weeping over it, I imagine, and just crying over it. And God, protect this child. He's a goodly child. Look how precious this child is, and Lord, I don't want to give him up. Lord, I don't want him to die. Lord, what are you going to do with this? And I'm sure she's just weeping over this basket, y'all. Just sit in this story with her for a minute. Smell the smells of it. And it's not just that she made the basket and she put it, it's not that simple, is it? It wouldn't be that simple for us to take our babies and just put them in a basket and say, okay, I'm obeying you, Pharaoh. No, it wasn't like that at all. This woman had to weep and had to pray and give this baby to God. Completely give this baby to God. What have you not given to God that He's asking you to give? Is it a job? Is it a baby itself? The desire to have a womb that works, that no longer works? Is it a home? What is it that God has given you, or maybe not given you yet, and He's saying, give it back. Give this to me. Give this back to me. Most of y'all have heard my testimony, but when Allie died and we buried her, I had to have a hysterectomy. My womb was broken. There was no child coming back in my womb. But I had a nursery. I had a little pretty aqua wall I had painted, because if you don't know me, that's my favorite color. I had some little JCPenney baby outfits hanging in the closet already for her to wear, who she would never wear. You know, I had all the things that a mother does in pregnancy preparing. I had the crib already laid out there. So what could I do with that? I would go in and I would slide my hands through the rails of this crib, and I would lay my hands there and I would say, God, put life in this crib. Put life in it, because the life ain't coming from me. It could only come from Him. What is Jochebed praying right now, y'all? She is making an ark and putting her baby out in a river. Can you even imagine her pain and sorrow? God, why did you give me a boy? Why didn't you give me a girl? She could have lived freely. I could be nursing her right now and sharing her with the family. Why is he a boy? What plans do you have for this boy? Why would you give him if you're only going to take him? All the questions humans would ask, right? But she's obedient to do it. She's obedient to give him back. Pharaoh said, put him in the river. So what did she do? She put him in the river. She was obedient to put him in the river. If you don't know how my story ends, God filled that bed with a precious little girl who's got my fat cheeks and my big brown eyes. And she is adorable, and she's hysterical, and we butt heads, but we love each other big. And God did that. And we're going to read here what God does for Jochebed. And it's radical. It's beautiful, and it's radical what God does here. Sometimes He's just wanting you to say, I give it back to you, God. Now you do something with it. What is it in your life that's so tender right now? There's something so tender, a dream, a desire, something that you want so badly. For Jochebed, it was this little baby. But I know every one of you's got something. I know you do. Maybe God's just saying, trust me with it. Let me hold your pen as I write your story. Trust me with it, that I can do exceedingly abundantly above all that you ask or think. I can do it. But you're like, oh, I can't give it to you. It's safer in my hands. I can't give it to you. And your hands are firm and grip tight. What is it, ladies? Because that's what He's wanting you to let go of today. There's something each one of us has to let go of today. Jochebed, it was a 3-month-old precious baby. So Miriam in verse 4, she sends her Miriam, who's probably, I'm going to guess, 8 or 9. I couldn't find an exact age on Miriam. I know Aaron was only 3 years older than him, almost 4 years older than him, but Miriam I couldn't. She's older than 4, okay? And so Miriam goes down to the river to watch the basket. Mom puts him in the basket, prays, weeps, goes back to throw up, I'm sure. I mean, I just can't imagine. And little Miriam stays to watch this basket. Let's pick up in verse 5. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river. What sickos! He said, put these babies in the river to drown, and then his daughters come to wash in the river with these dead babies? I mean, what sick people these people are. I was telling Sam about that, and he's like, well, the river's bigger than what you're thinking. It's not, it's not the little river, So it is the Nile. So anyway, immediately he says, put them in the river. And then the next verse is here, verse 5, it says that his daughter went down to wash herself in the river. What sickos they were. And her maidens walked along the riverside, and when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. And when she had opened it, she saw a child, and behold, the baby wept. And she had compassion on him. Who gives us compassion? God. Who gave her that compassion that day? God. God put compassion in her heart and said, this one is the Hebrews' children. Then said to his sister, to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may come and nurse this child? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, yes, go. And the maid went, which is Miriam, his sister. Miriam went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, take this child away, nurse it for me, and I will give you wages. She's going to pay her. And the woman took the child and nursed it. I got to get tissue, sorry. So she gave her baby to the Lord. Miriam's watching. Here comes Pharaoh's daughter to wash. And Miriam said, hey, do you want me to go get somebody to feed the baby? The baby's crying. You want me to go get somebody to feed it? And the woman's like, yeah, absolutely. That's a great idea. Miriam runs. Mom, you're not going to believe this. Mom, swollen face, tears, no more. Just like trying to get herself together. You know how you do, like pat yourself, fluff the hair, call Paula, get ready, run down there. And Pharaoh's daughter's like, will you nurse this baby for me? And she needed to nurse, She was feeling a little full and was probably in pain herself from not nursing him that morning or that day. It doesn't tell us exactly how long he was there. And she said, not only do I want you to nurse, I'm going to pay you. I'm going to pay you. Y'all, this is Pharaoh's daughter who has all the funds in the world. It's this mother who wept, could not believe God was taking her child. Not only did she receive her child back to her breast, got to feed him, but she got paid for it. Who can do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think? Jesus Christ can. He is the only one. He is the only way who can do what you hope will be done in your life right now. Whatever it is that you have in your heart that you don't believe can happen, she gave her baby, he gave it back, and she got paid for it. How incredible of a story is that? Let's not overlook the miracle of this story. I bet Jochebed was fit to be tied. She was probably running laps through their neighborhood that day. Glory, hallelujah. And not only, she didn't have to hide him anymore. She could take him out. All these other women at Walmart didn't have their baby boys. They were still sad, and she's just holding that baby, just so proud. My God can do this. Look at my God. She's probably testifying to everybody. Look at what my God did. She got that baby back. And not only did she get the baby back, but for years, these children normally were not weaned until 3 or 4 years old. So it wasn't that she had to give him back immediately. Now, we are going to get to that, because sometimes the giver is the taker. And she did eventually have to give it back. Do you think that was a little bit easier, though, knowing the power of God behind that? I want to believe it was, because she had already given him one time thinking he was going to die. She had already been obedient one time. So we're going to pause the story just quickly. I want to hit on this mother for a minute and motherhood, because when I was studying this just kept coming back to my heart. In my notes, I wrote, when we let go of what we are holding on to and truly give it to God, such as Abraham and Isaac. Isaac was his only son, and he said, go and sacrifice him. And in obedience, he did that. God will give you blessings back. Jochebed, she nursed Moses and was paid for it, a miracle that could only come from God Almighty. 2 Timothy 1, 5 through 6, and 2 Timothy 3, 14 through 15. I'm not going to turn there and read that right this minute, but in my notes, I'm just going to share this and paraphrase it. If you want to look that up, please do. It's 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 5 and 6, and then 2 Timothy 3, 14 and 15. So what's happening here in this story in 2 Timothy, these are Paul's last words. And Paul's last words he's going to die. He knows he's about to die. And he is writing to Timothy here. And anyway, he speaks of, at the very beginning, he speaks of Timothy's mother and grandmother. It's a beautiful story. Maybe we can do a Titus 2 on it sometime. But Paul is saying, remember as a child what you learned from your mother and grandmother. Timothy's father is not mentioned here. He says, I want you to remember the impact you've had, that your mother and grandmother had on you. Paul's last words to Timothy, remember what you learned as a child, the Holy Scriptures, and remain faithful. We don't have time to read all that, Timothy, because I'm trying to get you through this Exodus, but what I do want you to know, ladies, is that no matter how small your children are, you praying and laying hands over them, you singing worship songs over them, you reading the Bible to them, you talking in love to them, it makes all the difference in the world. Jochebed only had Moses for possibly 4 years. And he is one of the biggest characters of the whole Bible. Where did his faith come from? Who put all of that in him? Who prayed over him for generations? Now, he made mistakes, as we all do. He ended up killing a man we're going to get to, and he had to flee and different things. He wasn't a perfect man, but not one person in here is a perfect woman either. But who instilled in him the love of the Hebrew God, the one true God? Jochebed, his mama. Now, Paul is writing to Timothy, and he says, remember what your mother and grandmother taught you. So what I want to share with that is maybe you don't have a great relationship with your mother. Okay, I get that. Touche there. Okay, I get that. But maybe you're a mom now, and those generational curses could be broken. What you do, because you think when they're 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, man, we're in a training season at my house too. Little sinful hearts, they got to be trained. And it's some hard training, isn't it? And there's a lot of sleepless nights, and there's a lot of days you're like, I am a failure. My goodness, they're going to be in prison. Little hoodlums, they don't listen to nothing, right? But what you're doing, Mama, it matters. It matters so much. It matters. Keep doing it. Keep doing it. Here, Paul is saying, Timothy, remember the prayers of your mama and your grandmama when you were just a baby. Paul is reminding him of that. Why is that in Scripture? Because what they prayed and how they raised him matters. It's the same thing right here with Jochebed. She didn't have him very long in his life, but when she had him, you best bet she was singing over him, she was praying over him, she was loving him, she was telling him about the God of all creation. So if you've got a baby or you've got a grandbaby or you've got a little hoodlum, pray over them, pray over them, pray over them, pray over them. When they're not there, sometimes I just lay my hands on their pillows when they're at school and I just pray over them. The other day, I took a little bottle of frankincense and myrrh and it was almost out, and I just went over every doorpost to every bedroom in my house and I said, God, if there's any evil in my home, that it has to flee at the name of Jesus. Next bedroom, if there's anything evil in my home, it has to flee at the name of Jesus. And then I went and prayed over each pillow, God, in their dreams, that they would see you, they would be rooted in you. I prayed over every single bed. Am I an amazing mama? No, you can ask my kids. I'm not. But you know what I can do? I can pray Jesus down in my house. I can pray it over my husband's pillow. I can pray it over my kids' pillow. And sometimes it's the sweetest minutes. If they're just out of the house for 5 minutes, I can go in their rooms and pray over them. Because we do allow wickedness in. Radios, TV, electronics. Some of that trash needs to be out of our houses, what I would say. But if it is in your houses and you don't know what's come into their little eyes and ears and hearts, pray over them. That's what Jochebed was doing. Jochebed, she was taken up and treasuring every single second. Think about Mary. Mary had been told a sword would go through her heart and the pain. When Jesus was just a toddler, she had been told that. Simeon, I believe, and Anna in the Scriptures, maybe in Luke is where that is found. Can you imagine Mary just trying to treasure, knowing that he was different, knowing that he was special, that he was the Son of God? Jochebed knew Moses was different. From his birth, she says he's a goodly child. She knew he was different. All right. Jochebed's faith overcame her fear. I do want to share this too out of my notes. Jochebed's faith overcame her fear. That's how she was able to let go twice. Faith. Hebrews 11 verse 1. Hebrews 11 verse 1 talks of faith, and it says, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Maybe you've got something in your life that you can't see. Faith is the substance of things hoped for. That empty crib, a broken womb, the evidence of things not seen. Now she's 9, no longer in a crib, sassy, like some face lotion and lip gloss. She's adorable. And I couldn't see it in my brokenness. I couldn't see how God was going to put life in there. But faith is the substance of things hoped for. I hoped it would happen, and it did. Keep hoping, ladies. Keep that faith. But faith can overcome fear. Fear, 2 Timothy 1:7. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and sound mind. Sometimes our battles are up here. I'm going to say most of our battles are up here. He has given you power, love, and sound mind. Renew your mind. Is it true? Is what you're thinking, is what you're believing true? If it's not, kick it back to hell and believe on what is true. All right, let's get down to verse 5. Nope, we're past 5. What verse are we on? All right. 10. Okay. And the child grew, and she brought him into Pharaoh's daughter. So she's given him back. The second time she's given him back. And he became her son. And she called his name Moses, and she said, because I drew him out of the water. And it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown, that he went out into the brethren, and he looked on their burdens, and he spied on the Egyptians smiting a Hebrew, one of his brethren. So he was Hebrew, adopted into an Egyptian family, okay, adopted in, raised by the Egyptians, looks like an Egyptian. I mean, he had his makeup on. You know, you've watched the Ten Commandments movie. And he is looking, but he's looking over the balcony, and he sees quarreling going on. He sees a fight going on, okay? And it raged up in him. Now, he's a grown man at this time, okay? 40 years old. And he's looking at this. Verse 12, and he looked this way and that way, and when he saw there was no man, he slew the Egyptian. He killed the Egyptian, and he hid him in the sand. Now, he knew he was doing wrong, didn't he? Because it says he looked to the left and the right. I mean, he's looking around like, who's watching me? Who's always watching us, ladies? God is always watching. And when he went out the second day, behold, 2 men of the Hebrews strove together, and he said to them that did the wrong, therefore smitest thou fellow? There's another quarreling going on, and he's asking them about it. Verse 14, and he said, who made thee a prince and a judge over us? Intendest thou to kill me, as thou killed the Egyptian? And Moses feared and said, surely this thing is known. This is day 2, it says. So the next day, there's another argument going on, and they're like, what are you going to do? Kill us? Are you the judge over us? You're going to kill us too? And Moses was like, oh no. It's known that what I did. Verse 15. Now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to kill Moses, to slay Moses, and Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Now, last night I was Googling, how far is Midian from Egypt? And it's what I found was it was a 3-month walk. I don't know how accurate that is, but it's a far piece. And it would have had to be a far piece because Pharaoh came after, the scripture says Pharaoh came after Moses. So he couldn't have just went 2 or 3 miles, in the desert, and there was no place there either. So he had to get somewhere. But I don't know if Google's correct by that, but what I read was it was probably about a 3-month walk to get to Midian. Now, the Midianites were darker skinned than the Hebrews and the Egyptians, even though they were all very tan. They were much darker in their skin. And here in verse 16, it says, the priest of Midian, he had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs of water their father's flock. And the shepherds came and drove them away, and Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. And when they came to Reuel, their father, he said, how is it that ye are come so soon today? Because they were back so much quicker than they normally are. And they said, an Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us, and watered our flock. And he said unto the daughters, and where is he? Why is it that ye have left this man? Call him, that he may eat bread. And Moses was content to dwell with this man, and he gave Moses Zipporah, his daughter. Okay, so I just want you to know what that marriage looks like and what these people look like, but it's different than what Moses came from. But he was ready for different. He had been a Hebrew, was an Egyptian, and now is with Midian people. So he had been in 3 different people groups. Do you think Moses knew where he even belonged? You know what I mean? That's what I wanted you to see. I wasn't trying to be racist there at all. I was just wanting y'all to know, like, the different people groups Moses had partaken in. And it wasn't awkward for him, as it shouldn't be for us either. But Moses accepted that. But as I was reading this, it just dawned on me, did Moses even feel comfortable anywhere? Sometimes adoption adds that to you. Sometimes you feel like you don't belong in those groups, you know. And I wanted to add this because I think it's important. We are all adopted. If you are a child of God, you are adopted into God's family. Do you feel like you belong? Do you know how loved you are by Jesus Christ? When you go to church, and you're in that gathering, when you're here and you're in this gathering, do you feel like you belong? If no, what is it? What is holding you back? I just thought that was an important question for us to ponder on, because I really felt sorry for Moses. Yes, he had sinned. Yes, he had killed a man. But I feel like he never really truly felt loved anywhere he is. The counselor in me just wanted to sit down and talk to him like, who's hurt you in your life? You know, and you are loved. Look how amazing you are, you know. And I think about Moses and this man, and here he's just put into this other family now. Is he really dealing with all of this that's going on? And I think that's going to show in his character in the next few chapters, because he's got some things where he is a little unsure of himself. And I think sometimes we can become unsure of ourselves if we don't feel loved and we don't feel accepted into the family of God. We think our works matter. Oh, if I serve God better, if I do this, I'll be accepted. And Jesus says, no, I already love you, daughter. Can you accept the love that you've been given? All right, so let's look here in verse 22. And she bare him a son, and he called his name Gershom, for he said, I have been a stranger in a strange land. Verse 23, and it came to pass in the process of time that the king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel sighed by reason of the bondage, and they cried, and their cry came up unto God by reason of bondage. And God heard their groanings, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. And God looked upon the children of Israel, and God had respect unto them. So I underlined a couple words right there in verse 24 and 25. God heard their groanings. God remembered his covenant. God looked upon, and God had respect. I think those are some lovely words there that we need to make sure to take note of. God hears us, God remembers us, God looks upon us, and God respects that they were crying out for him. So that's where we're going to end today. And we're going to pick up next week with chapter 3 and chapter 4.